Forget the flawless weather. San Diego is a ghost town dressed in sunshine. Every historic street, every ocean breeze carries a voice from the past, a voice that won't shut up. From the gas lamps' shadowy mansions to the cursed Whaley house, these are the 15 locations where the dead still rule the 92101. Ready for the nightmares? One, Whaley House, San Diego. The air inside the Whaley house never truly settled. It hung heavy and cold, a palpable residue of a century and a half of ambition, tragedy, and sudden death. Built in 1857 on ground that had served as the city gallows, Thomas Whaley intended it to be a monument to his success, but instead, it became an architectural vessel for the spirits of San Diego's fraught early history. The floorboards, polished by millions of tourist footsteps, still creaked under the weight of occupants long gone. Before construction even began, the area was stained by the execution of Yankee Jim Robinson, a petty thief who was hanged from a cart on the site. Whaley dismissed the warning, but legend claims the man's final, strangled fall imprinted his agony upon the land. Soon after moving in, the Whaleys began to report strange sounds, heavy, uneven footfalls upstairs when no one was present, mimicking the gait of the dead man dragging his weight across the wood. These were the first tremors of the paranormal phenomena that would eventually earn the house its title as the most haunted house in America. The ghostly activity intensified as death visited the family repeatedly within the walls. Thomas Whaley himself is often encountered, usually as a lingering shadow in the parlor, guarding his ruined dream. However, the most unnerving encounters involve the distinct scent of cheap cigar smoke and the overwhelming, bitter presence felt in the dining room. Thought to be the spirit of Anna Whaley, eternally resentful of the spiritual intrusion on her domestic sphere, visitors frequently report items moving on their own, or feeling a sharp, icy touch on the back of their necks, a phantom admonishment for trespassing. One specific account recounts a security guard's shift interrupted by a deep, guttural moan emanating from the former courtroom, followed by the sound of keys rattling violently, though the guard had them safely clipped to his belt. As he fled the hall, he glanced back and saw the faint, shimmering outline of a tall man standing in the doorway, momentarily illuminated by the cold, blue light of the security monitor. The house is not merely haunted, it is actively occupied, a silent mausoleum where the dead remain stubbornly in charge. 2. Horton Grand Hotel, San Diego. The Horton Grand Hotel, standing in the gas lamp quarter of San Diego, holds a stillness beneath its Victorian elegance, a quietude often disrupted by whispers from the past. Its current structure, a deliberate melding of the original Grand Horton and the neighboring Brooklyn Comstock hotels, is a labyrinth of polished brass and mahogany, haunted by the very history it was built to preserve. It is said that when the gas lamp was still thick with frontier vice and transient hope, this establishment was a favored haunt for more than just weary travelers. The core of the hotel's spectral activity centers around the ghost of a gambler named Roger. Legend holds that Roger lost everything: his money, his patience, and finally, his life in a card game within the Comstock section, specifically room 309. It wasn't a clean death, he was shot, or perhaps bled out slowly, ensuring that a deep, clinging residue of despair and violence permeated the space. When the buildings were carefully disassembled and reassembled in 1986, Roger's spirit, tethered tightly to his final resting place, simply moved with the structure. Guests staying in the infamous room 309 frequently report intense cold spots and the inexplicable sound of heavy sighing when the room is empty. Others claim to have seen a vague, pale figure hovering near the antique armoire before vanishing. The hauntings are not limited to Roger's room. Staff have documented curtains opening on their own, lights flickering erratically, and the unnerving sensation of being watched from the shadows of the hallways. Occasionally, a faint scent of cheap cigar smoke drifts through the third floor, an anachronism in the modern, smoke-free environment. The Horton Grand presents a veneer of luxury, but beneath the veneer lies a constant spectral occupation. Roger remains a permanent fixture, an unwinnable hand still being played out in the dead of the San Diego night. When the elevator doors open onto the third floor and the air grows suddenly heavy, one is left with the certainty that they are sharing their accommodation with a bitter, bankrupt soul who never checked out. Three, Robinson Rose House, San Diego. The thick San Diego twilight clung to the facade of the Robinson Rose House in Old Town, a handsome, deceiving structure of weathered wood and stately verandas that once served as the bustling social center of the 1850s. A perpetual chill seemed to radiate from its foundations. Even on the warmest evenings, a silent repudiation of the lively tourist hub it now anchored. Those employed to maintain the historical site spoke in hushed tones of the lingering presence of James W. Robinson, the flamboyant founding father who died tragically of consumption in the very home he built. Robinson's decline was famously drawn out and agonizing, and the air of possessive melancholy he carried in life appears to have adhered to the fabric of the building. The legend persists that he resents the modern intrusions and the constant flow of disrespectful, uniformed sightseers. The primary hauntings manifest as profoundly personal disturbances in the second-floor bedrooms and the parlor. Custodians frequently report finding objects, antique dolls, ledgers, and heavy pieces of furniture moved from secured display cases and positioned squarely in the center of rooms, seemingly awaiting attention. The most unnerving manifestation involves the manipulation of light and sound. Visitors and staff alike have experienced an abrupt, heavy silence descending over the property, often accompanied by the immediate failure of all modern electrical systems, including sophisticated security cameras. Once, a historian working late in the parlor felt a cold, demanding pressure on her shoulder, followed by the distinct sound of a consumptive cough directly behind her. Intimate and wet, she turned to find the room empty. The smell of cloying lavender Robinson's preferred sick room scent thick in the air. The house, meticulously preserved, remains locked after hours. A vault for the past. But those who monitor the security feeds at the museum headquarters occasionally witness the inexplicable. A faint, tall shadow briefly eclipsing the window of the upper bedroom, pacing back and forth with a restless, demanding energy. Robinson Rose is not merely a house of history. It is a meticulously kept mausoleum where the founder still paces his final, fevered steps, perpetually waiting for someone to finally pay him the attention he believes he is due. Four, Cosmopolitan Hotel, San Diego. The air in Old Town, San Diego, often carries the scent of dry earth and old leather, but within the meticulously restored walls of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, the atmosphere is heavy with antiquity and residual sorrow. This structure, which has stood in various incarnations since the 1870s, operates under a perpetual psychic weight, leading some investigators to conclude that the hotel has never truly surrendered its original, often tragic, inhabitants. The building stands on ground once occupied by the doomed Casa de Lopez, and its current history is steeped in the volatility of the Gold Rush era. The most persistent legend revolves around the spectral presence of a past matron or a frequent guest, known only as the Lady in Black. Her identity is debated, perhaps the wife of a proprietor or a wealthy widow who died tragically while staying in the upper suites. But her energy remains undeniably tethered to the original stairwells and the second-floor guest rooms, particularly those overlooking the plaza. Staff members, operating under strict instructions to refer to incidents as unexplained activity, have documented numerous recurring phenomena. Guests frequently report the distinct sound of rustling silk passing down the main hallway late at night, often accompanied by the faint, cloying scent of expired lavender perfume. More disturbing are the physical manifestations, furniture shifting in unoccupied rooms. Most notably, a heavy Victorian dresser routinely scraped across the polished floorboards of room 14. Severe and sudden temperature drops defy the mild Southern California climate, concentrated specifically around the landing of the original staircase. To stay at the Cosmopolitan is not merely to rent a room, it is to occupy a space still monitored by the dead. The real terror often culminates in the lobby mirror, which has been known to reflect a momentary, gaunt silhouette of a tall woman watching silently from the balcony above. A reflection confirmed by witnesses, even when the balcony itself is demonstrably empty. The silence that falls after the rustling silk stops is often the worst part, confirming that whatever passed by has merely paused outside your door, waiting. Five, Davis Horton House, San Diego. The air in the gas lamp quarter often feels too heavy, but within the walls of the Davis Horton House, that density curdles into palpable dread. As the oldest standing structure in San Diego, this modest salt box has witnessed an unsettling cross-section of civic history, absorbing the raw fear of the early frontier. Built in 1850, it served as everything from a military barracks and a county hospital to a private home and an alleged brothel. The sheer volume of human suffering absorbed by the timbers is layered. The sickness of the patients, the desperation of the poor, and the harsh finality of death in an era without sufficient medical resources. The house never properly let go of its inhabitants, acting instead as a macabre repository. The most frequently documented phenomena center around the upper floors, specifically the former sick wards and patient recovery rooms. Investigators routinely log anomalous drops in ambient temperature, often concentrated near the antique rocking chair in the second-floor parlor, which staff swear moves autonomously through the night. The spectral presence most often encountered is that of a woman, a stern figure in a gray, high-necked dress believed to be a nurse, or perhaps an early matron who never left her post. Visitors report feeling her cold, judgmental gaze lingering on their backs, a distinct, inexplicable pressure that often forces them to retreat from the upper hallway. The terror is not confined solely to visual manifestation or thermal shifts. The house harbors subtle, insidious intrusions that defy rational explanation. The faint, pungent smell of cigar smoke often wafts without source through the main stairwell where Dr. Horton is said to linger, followed by the heavy, rhythmic sound of phantom boots ascending to the third-floor landing. On one recent late-night tour, a sensitive electronic voice phenomena device registered a clear, childlike whisper emanating from the locked children's room, a chilling plea simply stating, "Don't leave me here." The implication is clear. The souls within the Davis Horton house are not merely residual echoes of the past, but intelligent, desperately trapped entities perpetually awaiting a release that history refuses to grant them. Six, Villa Montezuma Museum, San Diego. The Villa Montezuma stands on K Street, a decadent, asymmetric monolith of Victorian ambition. Its stained glass windows, depicting poets and musicians, glow with a sickly yellow light long after sunset, lending the structure the air of a mausoleum dressed as a palace. This home was never meant for simple living. It was consecrated to the esoteric by its original inhabitant, the spiritualist medium and composer, Jesse Shepard. His elaborate Queen Anne design was purposefully engineered to accommodate the grand rituals of his spiritual practices, making the house less a residence and more a highly conductive instrument for communing with the dead. Shepard, who later went by the name Francis Grierson, lived in the villa only briefly, but the intensity of his presence saturated the woodwork. He hosted elaborate musical seances in the main parlor, claiming to channel the spirits of figures like Napoleon and Josephine through his performances. utilizing the house's specific acoustic features to amplify the perceived presence of his guests from the other side. The structure became a vessel for high-frequency psychic energy, a volatile history that left behind a persistent echo of the veil, being repeatedly thinned in the name of performance and spiritual curiosity. Curators and overnight security staff routinely document phenomena that defy rational explanation. The grand parlor piano, meticulously maintained but untouched by human hands, often begins to play dissonant chords emanating from the empty room around the pre-dawn hours. In the high turret room, the distinct, acrid scent of expensive, stale cigar smoke materializes suddenly, stinging the air before dissipating completely. Believed to be the preferred habit of Shepard himself, perhaps most disturbing is the movement observed in the intricate stained glass figures appearing to momentarily step out of the panels, shimmering shadows that move down the hallway, always pausing just outside the door to Shepard's private chamber before vanishing. The Villa Montezuma is not haunted by a single tormented soul, but by the cumulative residue of the spiritual portals Shepard aggressively opened decades ago. It remains a beautiful, tragic monument to a man who invited so many spirits inside, and who may now be unable to persuade them to leave his beautifully elaborate cage. 7. El Camposanto Cemetery, San Diego. The shadows of Old Town, San Diego, cling heavily to the wrought iron fence of El Campo Santo. This small plot, hemmed in now by modern sidewalks and trolley lines, feels violently separated from the present day. The air here is perpetually cool, even under the harsh California sun, and the dust settling on the unmarked limestone graves seems incapable of resting. Visitors report an acute sense of intrusion, a profound knowledge that their movements are being charted by unseen, aggrieved parties who watch from the periphery of the historic grounds. Established in 1849, El Camposanto served as the primary burial ground for the region's early settlers, soldiers, and victims of frontier disease. Its tragic legacy stems from municipal expansion in the 1880s, when the city, prioritizing transit over reverence, paved San Diego Avenue directly over the western third of the cemetery. Historical records estimate that dozens of remains, including those of Mexican vaqueros and unfortunate gold prospectors, were never properly relocated, their eternal rest fragmented by cobblestones and later asphalt. The earth beneath the busy street is a perpetual, disturbed crypt. The resulting hauntings are remarkably localized to the paved section of San Diego Avenue. Witnesses frequently report the appearance of a tall, dark spectral figure often interpreted as a vaquero on horseback, who vanishes abruptly near the trolley tracks. More disturbing are the claims of automobiles stalling directly above the forgotten plots. Drivers describe a powerful resistance, as if something invisible is intentionally dragging the vehicle backward, forcing a stop exactly where a headstone once stood. This energy manifests as severe cold spots and the distinct sound of muffled scraping, suggesting desperate attempts to climb out of the buried ground. El Camposanto is not merely haunted, it is actively disturbed, its silence broken by the continuous clamor of the living who carelessly drive over the deceased. The residents here are trapped beneath concrete, angry and forgotten. They do not wander away. They wait directly beneath the avenue for anyone foolish enough to pause in the wrong spot. The truth is often found etched in the tire marks on San Diego Avenue, the ghostly scratches of those who never found peace, demanding recognition from the heavy, uncaring road above them. Eight, Star of India ship, San Diego. The iron hull of the Star of India groans against the moorings in San Diego Harbor, a sound less of aging wood and more of trapped history. Launched in 1863, she is one of the world's oldest active sailing ships. Yet her long life was purchased at a terrible price. For decades, she endured the hellish Cape Horn run and transported hundreds of emigrants, often diseased, malnourished, and terrified from the UK to New Zealand. The passages were brutal, marked by unforgiving storms, catastrophic accidents, and the constant, chilling presence of death. The ship, built to conquer the seas, became instead a floating prison for souls who never reached their destination. The most persistent legend concerns John, a 12-year-old stowaway or apprentice, whose fate remains shrouded but likely involved a fatal fall from the rigging during a squall near the Falklands in the late 1880s. Staff and late-night visitors frequently report hearing the faint, desperate cry of a boy, sometimes accompanied by the sound of running feet on the quarterdeck, where John is believed to have taken his last steps. His playful but unsettling presence is confirmed by strange disruptions in the captain's cabin, where objects are moved and the heavy logbook is sometimes found open to the date corresponding to his death. The spectral crew is not limited to one boy. The ship's original cook is rumored to linger near the galley, manifesting as overwhelming cold drafts, his unseen anger triggering the loud rattling of unseen pots and pans. Furthermore, the number of catastrophic injuries and illnesses endured by the crews means the ship is layered with residual agony. Tools placed neatly in the storage lockers are routinely found scattered, and the heavy iron doors to the below-decks cabins have been known to slam violently shut, often trapping museum security personnel inside, who report feeling a distinct, oppressive pressure. As the ship sits, eternally preserved but never truly resting, she acts as a massive iron tomb, her deep, oil-scented corridors holding the chilling echoes of every lost soul who failed to complete their agonizing passage. USS Midway Museum, San Diego. The air over the flight deck of the USS Midway Museum, even under the fierce San Diego sun, often carries a profound chill, a residual coldness that science cannot explain. At night, when the last tourists have departed, the massive carrier, permanently moored at Navy Pier, begins to hum with something beyond generators and safety lights. She is a vessel of war and memory, a steel city that once housed thousands, and some of those souls, it seems, never received their discharge papers. Launched near the end of World War II, the Midway saw action through Vietnam and the Gulf War, enduring fire, explosions, and catastrophic mechanical failure. The official history logs only the structural damage and casualties reported. The unofficial history speaks of men trapped in flooded compartments, pilots vaporized in deck explosions, and sailors dying silently of exhaustion or disease in the labyrinthine lower decks. These were traumatic, sudden ends, imprinting themselves onto the ship's very structure. Staff often report doors slamming in the untouched admirals' and captains' country, areas sealed off from public access, and the distinct smell of burning aviation fuel lingering near the hangar bay, where no fuel has been stored for decades. The most unnerving activity centers around the cramped, terrifying catapult control room 3, a space nicknamed the shooter's box. Security cameras occasionally pick up a faint, translucent figure standing where the launch officer would have stood, often during the exact hours jets would have launched during the Korean conflict. One night, watchmen reported hearing muffled, panicked shouts emanating from the narrow passageways near the brig, followed by the sound of heavy chains dragging across the steel deck. When he investigated, the area was empty, save for a sudden, precipitous drop in temperature, leaving behind only the metallic tang of old sea spray and fear. The docents joke that the ship is still fully manned, but the custodians know better. They hurry their rounds through the mess halls and berthing areas, aware that the Midway is less a museum and more a floating mausoleum. Long after the crowds depart, the echoes of war remain, not historical recordings, but the genuine spectral residue of duty, sacrifice, and violent, lonely death, waiting patiently in the dark, silent chambers beneath the San Diego skyline. Then, Mission San Diego de Alcalá. San Diego. The air within the ancient walls of Mission San Diego de Alcalá, established in 1769, carries a density that modern construction lacks. It is not just the scent of aged adobe and dry chaparral. It is the palpable residue of generations of struggle and faith. This mission, the first in Alta California, stands less as a landmark and more as a scar tissue over a disputed landscape, where the confluence of conquest and conversion led inevitably to tragedy. The sun bakes the tranquil courtyard today, but the shadows within the cloister hint at the cold, violent night that etched itself permanently into the very foundations of the structure. The defining event occurred in November 1775, when hundreds of Kumeyaay warriors, rejecting the imposition of the Spanish system, descended upon the mission. They burned the structures and brutally murdered Father Luis Jaime, dragging him outside to an arroyo where he was hacked apart. His dying words, "Love God, my children," are said to echo silently in the sacristy where he was first interred. That act of martyrdom cemented a violent spiritual footprint upon the grounds. Visitors and staff frequently report a profound, overwhelming sense of anguish focused around the burial grounds and the reconstructed quarters, an existential sadness that defies any logical explanation. The residual energy manifests in more specific, frightening ways. Witnesses consistently document disembodied whispers in Spanish and indigenous dialects, particularly after dusk, near the historic cemetery where hundreds remain buried without proper marker. Cold spots, impervious to the midday heat, are frequently localized around the exact area where Father Jaime met his end. The most compelling evidence involves the apparition of a slight Franciscan figure, often seen moving silently through the arched corridors near the bell tower, sometimes accompanied by the fleeting, mournful image of a young Native American woman dressed in simple cotton, believed to be one of the early neophytes who died of endemic disease. The stone walls here remember everything, the prayers, the conversions, and the screams of violence, and they hold them close, waiting for the silence of the night to release them into the present day. The Grand Horton Theater, San Diego. The air inside the Grand Horton Theater, a jewel of San Diego's 1913 architectural boom, always hangs thick, smelling faintly of velvet dust and forgotten grease paint. Even during intermission, a profound silence seems to cling to the mezzanine and the upper boxes, a stillness that swallows ambient noise. The structure itself is a monument to Gilded Age opulence and tragedy, a time capsule where the applause of the dead still echoes faintly beneath the clamor of current production, suggesting that the most dedicated performers never truly left. The central persistent legend involves a figure known to staff as the impresario, a man who managed the theater during its volatile vaudeville era. Historical documents suggest he was financially ruined and humiliated when a rival production bought out his remaining interests in 1928. Rather than face the disgrace, he allegedly plunged from the uppermost balcony into the orchestra pit during a technical rehearsal, his act an eternal critique of the stage he could no longer control. Staff and long-term stagehands have logged repeated, highly specific phenomena, always tied to the operational aspects of the theater. In the projection booth, heavy doors inexplicably lock from the inside, and ancient, disconnected equipment has been observed vibrating violently. The chilling signature of the impresario is found primarily in row M of the upper balcony, where patrons frequently report an overwhelming sense of dread, followed by an immediate and radical drop in temperature that registers on thermal cameras. Most disturbing are the encounters backstage. Stage crews refuse to dismantle sets alone after midnight, reporting a distinct, cold pressure on their shoulders, as if an invisible figure is leaning in close to inspect their work. The most conclusive evidence collected by professional investigators are low-frequency recordings of deep, drawn-out sighs, seemingly emanating from the cavity beneath the stage floor. The Grand Horton is not merely haunted. It is actively occupied by a perfectionist ghost, perpetually waiting for the curtain call that will never come, forcing his spectral audience to share the enduring silence of his failure. Old Town San Diego State Historic Park, San Diego. The scent of baked earth and aged adobe clings to Old Town San Diego. Even after the last tourists have departed, beneath the cheerful veneer of preserved colonial life lies a history soaked in violent transition. A former military outpost, a site of early Spanish settlement, and the unavoidable resting place for those whose lives ended far too abruptly. The ground here is thin, separating the present-day bustle from the deep, restless silence of the mid-19th century. This history, rich with conflict, pestilence, and sudden death, explains why the park is considered one of the most actively haunted locations in Southern California. While attention often focuses on the famous Whaley house, the spectral activity permeates the entire historic district. One consistent report centers on the former site of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, where guests have witnessed the apparition of a small Mexican woman, often seen wandering the second-story balconies late at night, eternally searching for a child lost long ago. Deeper within the park, near the Casa de Estudillo, night watchmen have documented the sounds of faint music and harsh arguing emanating from rooms long locked and uninhabited. These are not merely echoes of the past. They are intelligent interactions with observers. Documentation compiled by paranormal investigators and skeptical security staff indicates frequent temperature drops, sudden bursts of antique floral perfume in empty spaces, and the audible shifting of furniture in the preserved offices. The strangest reports involve the Sealy stable, now a museum, where the distinct sound of horses galloping across dry cobblestones can be heard during the darkest hours. Despite the stable yard being empty, many believe the residual energy of the gold rush pioneers and the mission priests remains trapped within the thick adobe walls, unable or unwilling to depart the grounds of California's first true city. These lingering souls are not merely performing for the tourists. They are bound to the dirt. To walk through Old Town after midnight is to accept the sensation of being watched from the shadows of closed storefronts. A cold, profound realization that in this historic crucible, the dead vastly outnumber the living, and they never truly left. Presidio Park, San Diego, San Diego. Presidio Park is less a recreational space and more a monument to foundational bloodshed. Even under the glare of San Diego's perpetual sun, the shadows lengthening across the historic hills feel weighted. This high ground, where Father Junipero Serra established the first mission in Presidio in 1769, is saturated with the trauma of conquest, starvation, and the violent clash of cultures between the Kumeyaay people and the Spanish military. The majestic Serra Museum, with its commanding tower, stands directly over the former military compound and the burial sites of indigenous populations and early settlers. A structure built directly upon this restless history, the documented phenomena center predominantly near the steep inclines surrounding the museum grounds after midnight. Security logs frequently cite inexplicable mechanical failures and sudden, precipitous drops in ambient temperature, often accompanied by the distinct scent of sulfur or stale gunpowder in areas with no prior activity. Witnesses, particularly those who attempt late-night observation from the remnants of the old earthworks, report glimpses of translucent figures moving swiftly through the dense palm groves. These apparitions are generally described as Spanish soldiers in dated regalia, their movements stiff, silent, and rigid, as if patrolling a perimeter that vanished centuries ago. However, the most chilling evidence gathered by local paranormal investigators is auditory. Visitors positioned near the park's main parking area frequently report hearing the distressed, repetitive sound of a mission bell ringing faintly, typically 3 consecutive rapid chimes. Despite there being no bell structure nearby, this sound, allegedly associated with an early warning system or perhaps a death knell from the original settlement, seems to emanate from beneath the earth itself. It is a lingering echo of perpetual distress, a constant loop of suffering, For those who study the park's enduring influence, Presidio remains a profoundly charged location, a site where the first violent moments of California history are not safely archived beneath glass, but instead are constantly repeating in the cold, thick air above Old Town. The Keating Building, San Diego. The Keating Building anchors the corner of 5th and F Street, a somber monolith of reddish brick and granite in the vibrant gas lamp quarter. Built in 1890, the architectural grandeur belies a profound internal coldness. The original wrought iron cage elevator, still agonizingly slow, acts as the primary conduit for the building's heavy residual energy, an energy compounded by generations of troubled commerce and sudden, unexplained fatalities within its walls. This oppressive atmosphere, thick and tangible, clings particularly to the higher, unused floors, isolating them from the bustling life of the street below. Local legend attributes the deepest hauntings to the building's early decades, specifically the spectral presence of a stern, 19th century gentleman often identified as an early military investor is consistently reported on the upper floors. This figure, often sighted fleetingly in the dark recesses of former law offices, seems less malevolent and more protective, guarding some unseen asset. However, the more disturbing phenomena are linked to the catastrophic failure of the building's early ventilation systems and the subsequent swift deaths reported among staff and tenants in the humid summer of the early 1900s. Paranormal investigations invariably focus on the 3rd and 4th floors, where the air temperature drops without explanation and the distinct smell of cigar smoke manifests near the archaic elevator shaft. Employees frequently report the sensation of being physically pushed while ascending the stairs, and phones ring incessantly in vacant offices, dialing extensions decommissioned for decades. The most reliable phenomenon is the manipulation of the elevator. It frequently ascends, stops at the 4th floor, and opens to an empty hallway, refusing all commands until it decides to descend again. The Keating Building endures, its lower floors modernized for retail, but its upper levels remain steeped in oppressive history. Maintenance crews refuse solo overnight shifts, citing not merely the sightings, but the unsettling auditory experience, a low, rhythmic scraping sound emanating from the ceiling vents, too regular to be natural, suggesting something mechanical, cold, and eternally running in the darkness. It is a persistent reminder that in the oldest parts of San Diego, some occupants never finalize their lease. Old Point Loma Lighthouse, San Diego. The air atop the 462-foot cliff of Point Loma is perpetually thin, scraped raw by Pacific wind. The Old Point Loma Lighthouse, a squat Victorian sentinel decommissioned in 1891 after decades of fighting fog, stands silent now, a monument to a beautiful operational error. Its lens, designed to pierce the maritime darkness, instead often sat uselessly above the protective layer of clouds. But it is not the failed mechanics that draw the curious. It is the lingering, almost domestic presence of those who manned the lonely vigil. Captain Robert Decatur Israel, the last official keeper, and his family remained long after the light was snuffed out, and it is widely believed that they never truly left the isolated dwelling. Modern rangers and park volunteers consistently report spectral activity centered around the keeper's quarters. The most frequent manifestation is not a sudden chill, but an overwhelming, misplaced warmth coupled with a distinct, antique scent of withered roses, the signature attributed to Maria Israel, the captain's wife. Visitors often pause near the parlor, reporting the faint, rhythmic sound of a rocking chair scraping against bare floorboards when the room is demonstrably empty, an acoustic anomaly that defies explanation. Furthermore, staff entering the bedrooms have occasionally found the sewing machine inexplicably displaced, or noticed lengths of half-finished material draped over chairs in the exact manner Maria was known to leave them. Perhaps the most unsettling accounts involve the winding spiral stairs to the lantern room. Though the structure is locked down tight after dark, maintenance workers have reported feeling a distinct downward pressure, as if someone heavy were descending toward them, their presence palpable yet unseen. Witnesses leaving the grounds often swear they see a shadow crossing the curved glass of the decommissioned tower, not checking the light, but rather standing motionless, watching the dark, fog-swept coast. The old light may have been extinguished over a century ago, but the spectral keeper's vigil continues, trapped forever in the duty the fog refused to let them complete. That wraps up our countdown of the chilling top 15 haunted places in San Diego, from the historic, restless spirits of the Whaley House to the eerie maritime hauntings of the Star of India. San Diego clearly has its share of permanent, spooky residents. Did we miss your favorite frightening spot? Let us know in the comments below. And if you dare to explore these locations, remember to hit like and subscribe for more local paranormal investigations. Until then, stay spooky.